It's Matt Chorley on Wednesday morning. We are live on the YouTubes. We've thrown the big lever on the canvas. We are gearing up for PMQs Unpacked. 35 people already waiting. Nothing better to do on a Wednesday. Get on YouTube. We're live now. We'll pause the action live from the House of Commons as Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer go at it. Lara Spirit, Times Red Box reporter, is here. What do we think? It's interesting, isn't it? What does Keir Starmer go on? He did a lot on Brexit last week. Wasn't that exciting? Those of us who want a slightly more interesting PMQs might hope he goes on something else. Maybe will he latch on to Matt Hancock's WhatsApps?
That's an interesting question, the extent to which he laps onto Matt Hancock's WhatsApp. Of course, the people involved are slightly different this time, so it's not necessarily clear that it would be an own goal for Keir Starmer if he does go for that. I think, it's interesting you saying that he mentioned Brexit last week. That's true, and although it might have been slightly dull, it did nonetheless make matters slightly politically sensitive for Rishi Sunak, because, of course, it sounded like Sunak, as a result of Keir Starmer's questionings, had promised a result on his Brexit deal, only for his spokesperson to slightly row back on the nature of that deal and whether or not be binding immediately afterwards. So I think, Keir Starmer will be well aware that's the major issue of the week. But not only that actually, even though there's been, not particularly loud criticism of that deal so far, it's nonetheless still pretty delicate, and we're still waiting to hear, obviously, that final verdict from the DUP, but also there are quite a few on his backbenchers who he's not entirely clear will row in behind him anyway. So not yet out of the woods with regards to Brexit yet, and obviously understood to be one of his defining political difficulties as well. So I'd be surprised if that didn't come up today. But there are other issues that could come up too. Strikes, of course, the Royal College of Nursing around the table. Still going. Around the table with ministers, but no clear breakthrough as of yet. Also, energy support could be a possible line of inquiry as well. We saw last week the SNP obviously used Prime Minister's questions to talk about that, despite their own, internal political turmoil that might have come up otherwise. But then, since then, we've also seen Ed Davey and the Liberal Democrats go down that line as well, calling for the kind of, bonanza on deals and a kind of further tax on oil and gas bosses as a result to up people's support. So I think given the easing of government support in April, that could be another possible line. And given the news of a budget surplus last week, that also could lead to that coming up today too. Is
this week supposed to be economy week for Keir Starmer? I'm trying to remember, because he did a speech
so we saw
in the
a major
week
speech
on
Monday.
Well, yeah.
Of course, last week we heard that the first of those big missions was going to be the fastest growing economy in the G7, which of course is a very difficult feat for Keir Starmer to achieve on his own, not least because it requires on many other things other than his own skill in leading. But then we saw that major speech at the beginning of the week, although because that came perfectly timed with the Brexit deal that Rishi Sunak had negotiated, it didn't get a huge amount of coverage. So of course we could see that come up.
He might try and reiterate his economic positioning. Some of you already saying hello on the YouTubes. Hi from Taunton, says Stephen. First out the blocks in Taunton. Although the broadband speed in Somerset so slow, maybe that was from last week. Ian says hello from Ipswich. Dawn says hi from Crosby. Miserable in grey, but no squirrels. Thank you, Dawn. Stephen says good morning from drizzly Leicester. Jonathan, greetings from Uckfield. Morning from Portsmouth, says Stu. Hello from Cowles on the Isle of Wight, says Pip. Hello, lots of you. Log on and let me know where you're watching along. This feels like a PMQ's possibly live, where what happens on the backbenches and a bit of DUP, although quite how long it's going to take the DUP to decide whether or not they like this will be interesting. But trying to gauge, this feels like possibly the best week Rishi Sunak's had as Prime Minister. I think without a doubt, yeah. But you're right that actually keener eyes will look at the backbenchers today because, of course, not only on this Brexit deal, where I'm sure there'll be a few contributions to that effect, but also, of course, on small boats. We saw a number of questions on that. I think I counted 3 last week to that effect, not from, typically unsympathetic backbenchers to Rishi Sunak's leadership. So that is seen, the kind of detain and deport, that will be seen as the next major priority for Rishi Sunak, whether or not he can get fresh legislation out to bat before, obviously, the budget in a fortnight's time. So I think that will be something that will be worth looking at. MPs, when you speak to them privately, still lamenting the fact that there hasn't been a breakthrough on that so far. And so I would be surprised if you didn't hear that from the backbenchers. But you're right as well on the DUP. Lots of people talking about how difficult it is to gauge, not just the DUP's leadership's line on this, but the fact that actually, it's quite hard to work out what the different individual members think. We heard from Sammy Wilson, obviously, this morning, very critical of the Stormont break being anything like a break at all. And so the kind of different views of different members might be something that people want to look out for today as well. Yeah, in fact, like you're saying, Sammy Wilson, and you're right, because although there aren't very many of them, they do seem to have quite a broad range of views and opinions. I think we've got the clip, actually. Let's have a listen to what it was that Sammy Wilson was saying on breakfast this morning.
We will not knee-jerk have a knee-jerk reaction to this deal. It means too much to us, and we've got to give it full consideration. And at the end of the day, we will then come to a conclusion. Is this a deal which safeguards the union, that safeguards our economy? If it's not, then we'll reject it. If we come to the conclusion on balance it does, then we'll accept it.
I mean, it feels still, Lara, like the DUP is trying to set the bar quite high. They're sort of looking for a reason not to support it rather than doing their best to get on board.
Yeah, I mean, they're not known for their support of Brexit deals negotiated by Conservative prime ministers. So I think it would be surprising. And I think, to be honest, the bar has been set at a point at which most would expect the DUP not to come out in support of this anyway. If the DUP were to lend their full-throated support to this, I think people would think that would be pretty astonishing by way of a political achievement for Rishi Sunak. What they are hoping for in number 10 is for any opposition for it to be moderate or at least to be slightly muted or conditional. So I think it wouldn't be seen as the end of the world if the DUP chose not to support this, but I think just the way in which that is pitched and the level of their disagreement with this, I think, will be interesting to watch. And because Sammy Wilson from the beginning has been one of those MPs who has said that he feels is very, very unlikely to deliver on this, I think we're already sort of well aware of his reservations with it, and it wouldn't necessarily come as many surprises if that individual opposition were to continue.
Well, all eyes on the House of Commons for that. PMQs Unpacked is coming at 12 o'clock. In fact, if you're on the YouTube, what do you think? What do you think Keir Starmer should ask? Post your comments in the. Hello, Matt, Katie from Northampton. My uncle Michael thinks you're annoying. I agree, but I think you also annoy the people who deserve it too. Thanks for that, Katie. Lovely to see Lara join you for PMQ, says Jeff. That's nice. Yorkshire Court. No. All right. Get a room. Good morning from San Francisco, says Pat. Hello from Horsham and West Sussex. Cape Town here for this chat. Here, ready for this chat being more fun than Sunak and Starmer. I don't know what you mean, Craig. Wendy's in Wiltshire as well. Get on the YouTubes. YouTube.com, search Times Radio. Let us know where you are and what you think might come up. Lara, lovely to see you. Go and adopt the brace position to watch the best of the rest.
Wait.
Lara will watch all the backbench contributions and we will, and she'll pick out the best so that you don't have to. Right, here's a question. How do we fix the government? Well, one person who's going to at least try to find out is Dr. Hannah White from the Institute for the Institute for Government. Sorry, there's a lot of institutes around. Hannah, morning. Nice to have you with us.
Morning. Yes, that's the second time in 24 hours someone's nearly billed me from the IFS. I'm not sure what's going on.
I take it as a compliment. There were worse Westminster-based institutes to be aligned with, possibly.
There are indeed.
So this is quite the task. Why doesn't the centre of government work? Explain what you mean. What is the centre of government, and in what sense is it not working, do you think?
So what we have decided to do is set up a one-year commission, the IFG, together with Anthony Selden, to look at primarily number 10, the Cabinet Office, but also the relationship of those two bits of the centre to the Treasury, which is, of course, key. And our question is, when things go well, when the right personalities and structures and things happen to coincide, the number 10, the centre of government, can pull rabbits out of hats. We have the vaccine task force, maybe, unless it collapses over the following, days and weeks. We have the Windsor framework. The centre of government can deliver, but too often people, and particularly prime ministers who go into number 10, complain that actually the centre of government isn't as powerful, as they expect it to be, that the levers that they have to make government deliver on their priorities just don't seem to be there. And so we wanted to really dig into this question of why is that the case? Have we got a centre of government that sort of has evolved over time, over history, and hasn't really sort of reflected and equipped itself for the 21st century?
Is it? It's always interesting when you speak to particularly former prime ministers and people who've worked around them. They've always been quite surprised. You'd think you're in number 10. It's the heart of the government. It's the most famous address in the country. And they pull a lever or they say something must happen and it doesn't happen. What is it? That seems to be true of all governments of all political persuasions. Why is that? Do you think? And is it about the building? Is it about the structure? Is that just the nature of all governments around the world?
Well, these are the questions we want to ask. And there are hypotheses that people put forward which look at lots of different aspects of this issue. One, as you say, is to do with the building. Is the building too small, too chopped up into lots of little pieces because it's basically a house and not a sort of modern office? Is it to do with culture and behaviour and the people who end up in number 10 and whether those people have the right qualities to make a success of being there? Or is it about structures? Is it about the relationship between number 10 and the Cabinet Office and the Treasury and the sort of federal nature of Whitehall, where you have all the government departments and the sort of ability of number 10 to conduct analysis and to hold Secretaries of State and their departments to account for delivering on what they've said is their priority, just isn't there. So this is what we want to look at. And we are by no means the first, I should hasten to add, to have thought about this. But we feel that there is a really interesting moment now. We have a new government which is seeking to establish itself. We have an opposition who, if the polls are to be believed, feel that they might have a shot at being in government. So we have got a brilliant set of commissioners who we've brought together, some with experience from within government, but also many from other walks of life. And we want to take the time to do what it's actually sometimes really difficult for people in the centre of government to do, to take a step back and say, is there a better way of doing this?
And what's the process? What's the time scale on this? How soon might you be able to help out Rishi Sunak with making number 10 work?
So we've given ourselves a year, which feels pretty tight, although you might think it's a long time. We are going to take evidence from a wide variety of witnesses, and we're encouraging everyone to send in their thoughts about the people we should be talking to in the UK, in the devolved nations, overseas, and in lots of different sectors about this. We want to hear from as many people as possible. We plan to report around this time next year, but we, as you say, want to make sure that as our thinking evolves, we're testing it, but also sort of putting it out there for the benefit of the current government. So we will be, communicating. Hopefully, I'll be back talking to you over the course of the year, Matt.
We will definitely have you back, because it's right up our street. Hannah White from the Institute for Government. Thanks very much for joining us. It's all about that new inquiry, a new commission to look at why the centre of government doesn't work and how to make it work. Well, we'll go live to the centre of Parliament next. PMQs Unpacked is live here on Times Radio. Tim Shipman's here. We will pause the action and analyse the key exchanges in real time. You listen along on Times Radio, watch along on the Times Radio YouTube channel. PMQs Unpacked is next.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley. This is Times Radio. PMQs Unpacked is next. First, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. The DUP has criticised a key part of Rishi Sunak's new Brexit deal as the Prime Minister prepares to sell his agreement to MPs in the Commons this lunchtime. Sammy Wilson, a senior DUP MP, told Times Radio that the Stormont break, the mechanism by which Northern Ireland can reject changes to EU goods rules, is not really a break at all. He says it's a delaying mechanism. Matt Hancock's rejected claims he ignored advice on care home testing in England during the COVID outbreak following leaked WhatsApp messages. The Daily Telegraph says they suggest the former health secretary was concerned about the impact on wider testing targets. He insists that's a distorted picture of what happened. The Greek government has announced 3 days of national mourning after 36 people died and dozens were injured in a high-speed train crash. The country's president's cutting short a visit to Moldova, saying she wants to give support to those who need it. And the former France striker, Just Fontaine, has died at the age of 89. He holds the record for the most goals at a single World Cup, having scored 13 times at the 1958 tournament in Sweden. We'll have a full news and sport roundup at past. But now, live on Times Radio and the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
And Tim Shipman is here looking resplendent in pink again.
Well, it was so popular last time.
I
actually got messages saying nice top and things like that.
Well, there we are.
So I thought we'd give it another whirl.
If that's not a good reason to get on YouTube, I don't know what is. Go to Times Radio's YouTube channel and you'll be able to see Tim in his pink. Tim, I genuinely don't know what Keir Starmer might choose to go at today.
No, I mean, the big stories are not obvious sort of PMQs fodder. Refighting the pandemic might be something that Keir Starmer wants to get into later in the year when the inquiry gets going, but I struggle to see that that's going to lead to 6 questions today. And the Brexit stuff, they've said often enough that they'll vote for this deal, and in the absence so far of ERG kicking off or DUP going beyond a few mild criticisms, there's not really much to pull at in the same way Starmer did last week in terms of ramming a chisel between Sunak and his party. So, maybe he's come out with these 5 missions, things on the cost of living, things on crime, that sort of thing, whether he wants to try and illuminate one of those for the nation, get back to big, broad arguments about the state of play after, a few weeks of sort of much more detailed kind of granular news, and try and frame the rest of the year. That's possible, I guess. But no, it's one of those where there's a bit of a challenge for Labour, but it's kind of interesting to see what they regard as important and how they decide to frame things today, because that'll tell us a great deal about how they plan to move forward.
Today might be a day for the old William Hague trick of
dance around
the folder. Do something on aardvarks, then something on the zoos, and and then Rishi Sunak really needs to get around the
Those are too simple. You want to go for something about 2/3 of the way through the alphabet, don't you?
It's interesting, actually. Do you file aardvarks under zoos? That would be the question. Is it all animals? Yeah. Anyway, there's an interesting question. Looking at the House of Commons, lots of MPs are wearing daffodils on their lapels today because
St David's Day.
It's St David's Day. Oh, in fact, I say that. Lots of Labour MPs are wearing them. They're not on the government front bench. Rishi Sunak's not.
I know this because one of my chums is a Welshman and he sent me a picture of a dragon this morning.
Well, there we are. Rishi Sunak's not wearing one, though. Nor is Suella Braverman or Dominic Raab. Maybe Dominic Raab threw his at someone. Allegedly. We don't. I'm not saying that was just a joke.
Well, I was trying to see whether Angela Rayner was wearing one because she admitted wearing a wig the other day.
Did she?
When she goes out on a night out, she likes to wear a wig.
Does she? What? She doesn't get recognised?
Apparently.
Maybe Michael Gove should try that.
That's what she suggested.
What's weird is Jeremy Hunt's got one on, the Chancellor. He's got a daffodil on.
A wig?
No. And obviously the Welsh Secretary, David Davis, has got one on.
Very wise.
TC. But no, not Rishi Sunak, which is a surprise given that there was some YouGov polling out this week saying the Tories are facing near wipeout in Wales. I think I'd have probably stuck one on. Anyway, we can go live to the House of Commons now to see who's got a daffodil on and who's got a wig on. It's question number 1 from Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I join the Prime Minister in wishing everybody a happy St David's Day? Mr. Speaker, after 13 years of Tory failure, the average family in Britain will be poorer than the average family in Poland by 2030. Exactly. That's a shocking state of affairs. If the Tories limp on in government, we're going to see a generation of young people learning to say Auf Wiedersehen pet in Polish, aren't we?
Mr. Speaker, it's clear to everyone that the biggest impact on households' living standards is the energy prices that we're suffering at the moment as a result of an illegal war in Ukraine. And I just remind the honourable gentleman what we are doing to ease people through that. Because of our energy price guarantee, right now the government is paying over half of a typical household energy bill, saving households right now £1,000. It is one of the most generous support schemes globally. Now, he knows future decisions to support cost of living are for the budget, but if he's concerned about the cost of living, what he should do is stop making inflationary, unfunded spending commitments and back our plan to halve inflation.
There we are.
Cost of living,
and
which we're now learning to say, like we used to say, schools and hospitals. It's all one word. Cost of living.
Cost of living is all one word. And Keir Starmer addressing the problem of when you make a big speech on the economy and nobody takes any notice because there's other news on Brexit.
Better have another go at it.
Just repeat the same line. The line earlier this week was that Britain's on course to be poorer than Poland, and he thought he'd have another go at it.
Well, then he talked about our Wiedersehen pet, which is a bit of a retro reference.
How old do we think that is?
1983, 1985.
Let's have a look.
I think, with the 2 series.
Anyone on YouTube who wants to tell me? It was on from, originally, it seems like it was on from 1983.
Bingo.
1984, then it came back in 1986.
That's right. Yes.
And then they had another go in 2002 and 2004, which I think was
probably... Yeah, we could probably forget about the latter
successful
ones.
So you'd have to be well over...
Well, my age, basically, well over 40 to have a clue what he's talking about there.
But also you need to have watched it and understood it and have got the idea.
And just for those who didn't watch it...
Yes, please do. Let's unpack
a bunch of British brickies, primarily, who were unable to find work in the torrid times of early 80s Britain, went to Germany and built stuff and created lives there and sent their money home to their families. And it's one of those sort of classic ITV comedy dramas where, it was quite moving and it was quite funny and it was a good ensemble cast of guys enjoying themselves. What I rather regret there from Keir Starmer, it's all very well saying you'll have to say Auf Wiedersehen in Polish. It would have been a lot more impressive if he had done.
Yes, let's have a look and see what that is. Yeah, I wonder whether somebody in the office thought they'd have a go. And so it was goodbye pet in Polish. Let's see if we can. In terms of the detail of it, Rishi Sunak accusing Labour of inflationary unfunded spending commitments. And actually, the big complaint you get from Labour MPs and frontbenchers right now is they're not allowed to commit to anything.
No, indeed.
There aren't. Rachel Reeves is preventing them from making any big spending
ruling
commitments.
with a rod of iron, we're told. So yeah, it's an intriguing aspect to this. Sorry, I can't think of anything more intelligent.
But let's go. We'll go back to
You're absolutely correct.
I will see if I can get to the bottom of how you say Auf Wiedersehen pet in Polish. You and I will do this before the end of PMQs. Let's go back then to the House of Commons. This is question number 2 from Keir Starmer.
The dictionary definition for unfunded commitments is last year's kamikaze budget. Mr. Speaker, the only country in the G7
kamikaze
still
budget.
poorer than it was before the pandemic, and he stands there pretending it's all fine. Total denial about the damage and decline that he is presiding over. Delivering growth and tackling the cost of living crisis will mean standing up to vested interests. Energy bills are going to go up by £900 in April. He knows he's going to have to act, but who's going to pay? Hard-working families through higher taxes and more borrowing, or the oil and gas giants celebrating record profits?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know the honourable gentleman. He made a rare trip out of North London to visit Davos. Recently. Perhaps while he was there, he missed the survey of 4,000 global CEOs from 100 different countries that ranked the United Kingdom as their #1 European investment destination. Now, if he's serious about getting the economy growing, then he should stand up to the vested interests in the unions and back our minimum service levels.
People just throwing out all sorts of old lines. Kamikaze budget. We've not had that for a long time. And then Rishi Sunak having a go at Keir Starmer for going to Davos.
Yeah.
It was about 6 weeks ago, wasn't it?
That's a while ago. And also, it's not like he's never been to Davos. And then we had minimum service levels. I'll be honest, it was just a sort of word soup, wasn't it? And I'm too busy excitedly trying to find out what Auf Wiedersehen pet is.
How do you say goodbye pet in Polish? I think we've now established why Keir Starmer didn't attempt it, because this is it according to Google.
Żegnaj zwierzaku.
And again?
Żegnaj zwierzaku.
Żegnaj zwierzaku.
Żegnaj zwierzaku.
Żegnaj zwierzaku.
Żegnaj zwierzaku.
Żegnaj zwierzaku.
Yeah, there we are. Very good. I'm glad we sorted that out. There's nothing more really to say about that word soup, I don't think. Let's go back to the House of Commons again. This is question number 3 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, here's the thing. All the CEOs of business saying there's only one party with a plan for growth, and it's this party here. And there's only one party that broke the economy, and they're sitting there. Now, on energy bills, it's not as complicated as he pretends. Oil and gas companies are making vast, unexpected profits, whilst working people face misery of higher bills. He can boast all he likes, but companies like Shell didn't pay a penny in windfall tax last year, and they're still not paying their fair share now. Why doesn't he admit his mistake, get rid of the loopholes in his botched windfall tax, and finally choose family finances over oil profits?
Mr. Speaker, there's a theme here. You seem to forget, as Chancellor, I introduced a new tax on energy companies. Energy companies will pay a 75% tax rate on extraordinary profits, comparable, indeed higher than other North Sea nations. Now, that's what his shadow levelling up secretary called for recently. But I've got good news for them. We did it a year ago. They've got to keep up. Now, I know, Mr. Speaker, they claim to support levelling up, but they really do need to keep up.
OK.
Has everyone gone mad?
No, they're just doing dad gags, aren't they?
They're now... I wonder how long ago Lisa Nandy said that about windfall tax.
Well, look, there's an important thing here. This is good terrain for Labour to push on because we've just had a new energy price cap ruling, which will mean that despite all the help the government's been pouring in at really quite vast expense, bills are still going to go up.
Yeah.
And because the government is withdrawing some of its support, the big debate ahead of the budget later this month is that, do they keep that level of support going? I think it's going to be quite politically difficult for them if they don't. That doesn't mean they'll do it, but this is going to become a focus of a lot of lobbying from the opposition, from a lot of interest groups, and I would think from some Conservative backbenchers to try and sort of just buy a bit more time to get through the problems and wait for the drop in the cost of energy to start to filter through to customers. And then we have this sort of brilliant exchange about windfall taxes, which was largely speaking Keir Starmer going, why don't you do this? Your windfall tax is rubbish. And Sunak saying, I did a windfall tax. And it's like, yeah, we know you did. Which, to be fair, is more than Boris Johnson or Liz Truss ever used to say. They used to deny doing it even when they'd done it.
It had a strange name when Rishi Sunak did it the first time. Additional profits levy.
Yes.
Or something. Energy, yeah.
Which was that he didn't want to be seen to be doing the windfall tax by his own side, but as soon as Labour have a go at him, he's like, look at me and my windfall tax. So, I mean...
Unfortunately, our feeders impact is becoming more complicated. Jane has been in touch saying a better translation would be Zobagzni Kokani. I should have checked that because that could be deeply offensive to all of our Polish listeners.
Is that because we're, rather than pet as an animal, we're doing sort of love or
pet
something?
Maybe.
A term of
Jane,
affection.
if you want to get in touch. In fact, Jane, if you text us 872 start message the word Times, we can get you on. Let's get him on the phone.
Send us a voice note.
Send us a voice note. Send us your phone number, Jane, and we'll get you on. You can give us some Polish lessons, then we can pass it on to Keir Starmer. Because frankly, that makes as much sense as what's going on in PMQ today. Because we've got to, for legal reasons, let's go back to the House of Commons. Question number 4 from Keir Starmer.
He introduced a tax on Shell and they haven't paid a penny. Fantastic work. If he was serious about investing in the future of the country, he'd start with housing. A few months ago, his backbenchers forced him to scrap house building targets. At the time, he stood there and said it would mean they would build more homes. Well, would you believe it? A few months later, the Home Builders Federation say house building is going to fall to its lowest level in 75 years. Now, he can change course on this. He can bring back targets and planning reforms, or he can duck that fight and let a generation down. Which is it?
Prime Minister. Actually, Mr. Speaker, we've had recordly high numbers of house building and indeed the highest number of first-time buyers in around 20 years under this government. But he talks about investing for the long term of our country, and that's important when it comes to energy security, Mr. Speaker. But Labour's policy is to oppose any new oil and gas licences in the North Sea. It is an absurd policy that would see us paying billions to countries abroad for our energy while shipping it here with twice the carbon emissions. It's typical political posturing. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for our security, just like the Labour Party.
Well,
because of the noise, I don't think the Prime Minister is hearing the questions, because I do think it was on house building. Keir Starmer.
He took the words out of my mouth.
Well, that's a better way to have a pop
Hoyle.
at someone as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
From Lindsay Hoyle than the sort of, I need to stop you doing this or whatever.
Have a cup of
just
tea.
Take the mickey out of them.
Yes, we're on to house building now.
Yeah, so you're right. We've gone to H in the alphabet.
Yeah,
flicking through.
So what did we had? We had Poland to begin with, then kamikaze budget, then the windfall tax. Now we're on to house building.
Yeah, well, he's there's a theme and he's working his way through it. Yeah, I mean, house building is a classic generational failure of all the whole British political class. But yes, they're right to draw attention to the recent end of those targets.
Exactly, but Keir Starmer committed to targets and planning reforms. There's a reason why the Conservatives haven't done all that. It's because it ends up being really controversial in local areas.
It's always very difficult in local areas, but without. But frankly, there are some things it's easier for Labour parties to do, and there are some things it's easier for Tory parties to do. It's probably easier for a Labour Party to do housing reform because it doesn't have shire counties getting hoity-toity in Tory seats. They don't mind upsetting Tory seats. In the same way, it's easier for Labour to reform the NHS because they're essentially trusted with the NHS, and if the Tories come along and try and reform it, it tends to run into trouble, which is why most Tory governments just chuck money at it and hope it will go away. And then we saw a classic of the pivot, didn't we, from Sunak? I don't much... he was told, you're about to have the worst house building for 75 years. He said, well, it has been good. And by the way, pivot, energy security, that's very important as well. And then a classic sort of Sunak point, a man who clearly has, immersed himself in the detail. And he's probably right to say that Labour's policy is a bit bonkers on oil and gas licences, but there's obviously political reasons for opposing that too if you're doing greenery, and this shows how complicated government is. You want energy security, so you need your own supplies of energy. You want to do greenery and saving the world. It's quite difficult to start promoting oil and gas. This is government, and it's difficult, and it's easy to score points in both directions, and that's why we're here, because it's Prime Minister's question time.
And it's absolutely all over the place. Loads of you are getting in touch about...
Żegnaj zwierzaku.
Yeah, good. That's goodbye pet in Polish. Jane won't come on. She says, I'm not Polish. Get one of your Polish listeners on. Jen says, you slightly missed the point with Wiedersehen pet. Keep the pet. It's an affection name like love. You just need the goodbye in Polish. So it should be Widzenia. No, Widzenia pet. And Helen says, goodbye pet in German is Auf Wiedersehen Haustier. So you really just need to translate goodbye in Polish. So it's Du Widzenia pet. Anyway.
That's true. The pet doesn't change, does it?
No, so we just want the goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've made a Horlicks of that.
So it should be this.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia pet.
Do widzenia pet.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.
I mean, I think Keir Starmer could have had a crack at that.
He could definitely have had a go at that.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia pet.
Do widzenia
Do
pet.
widzenia.
Who knew this is where we're going to end up today?
Right,
we've still got 2 more.
I don't want to cast aspersions, but this is more fun than what's going on in the chamber, isn't it?
This is why you see, on the other side, they're just playing out PMQs. You'd be absolutely, I was almost swore then, you'd be bored witless is what I was going to say. Let's go back to the House of Commons. This is question number 5. Well, my joke wasn't that good. I think we were shouting more from Lindsay Hoyle.
On house building, Mr. Speaker,
that's the
lowest level for 75 years. A whole generation of people desperate to get on the housing ladder. 13 years in power, and all he's got to say to them is, it's somebody else's fault, let me deflect. No wonder they're furious with his government. And it's not just bills or housing. Families are paying over £1,000 a month just to send their child to nursery. If he scrapped his non-dom status, he could start to fund better childcare, put money back in people's pockets and get parents back to work. Seems a pretty simple choice to me. So what's he going to choose? Wealthy tax avoiders or hard-working parents?
Well, Mr. Speaker, if we want to see what happens with house building under a Labour government, just look what's going on in London, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to tax, the facts don't suit his argument. Let's just go over them. The wealthiest pay more tax, the poorest pay less tax than under any year of the last Labour government, Mr. Speaker. Now, about his plans, he's already spent the money he claims he'd raised from that policy on 5 different things, Mr. Speaker. It's the same old Labour Party, always running out of other people's money.
It's a job to keep tabs on this. So we had a bit more house building, then we've moved on to tax and benefits.
Yes. I mean, I don't know what to say, really. The question was not very exciting. The answer, though, interesting little sort of clue there towards the end of Sunak's thing where he talked about, he's already spent this money that he said he's going to spend on 5 different things. Now, that is a classic trope of an election campaign where the research departments of your parties get to work on everybody's pledges. The IFS and everybody else pores over it. But you can see, I think Jeremy Corbyn's lot, according to the Conservative Party, spent certain tax rises about 20 times over. And if they're, one of the things that the Tories will hope to have achieved is to have stabilised the economy by the end of the year, and they will still then run, because they have to, because it's a classic trope of a campaign, that, Labour can't be trusted with the economy, and they'll say, despite everything we talked about before, despite Rachel Reeves stopping people spending money, if it looks like they have spent it multiple times, you can guarantee that will be all over the posters, all over the digital ads, and that's what, Keir Starmer will be running it. It's time for a change, and the Tories will be saying it's too risky, and that's, everything we know about the next election already. And, too busy running out of other people's money. It's a bit of an old line, but it's quite a good quote.
Yeah. 1976, it seems to have been. She was on the TV. So it was after she'd become leader of the opposition, but before she got into government. And she said, socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. So Rishi Sunak reaching deep into the history book, even older than Auf Wiedersehen Pets. But it's a good line, and people like it, and it got a cheer from the backbenchers.
Yeah, and again, after a pretty slow start, the last couple of questions, the Tories behind seem a little more satisfied than they were at the beginning of this exchange.
David's been in touch. This programme needs a serious rethink. Annoying on so many levels. The skitting in jokes, annoying explainers. I mean, that's literally the point of why we're here to explain things. Tim is interesting, Matt is woeful.
I think that's very unfair.
Do widzenia.
Yeah, goodbye, Dave. Let's go back to the House of Commons. Who knows how Keir Starmer's going to tie all of this up together in one last exchange. This is question number 6 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, he's never happier than he's pretending everything's fine or blaming someone else. And didn't we just see it there? He is choosing tax avoiders over hard-working parents. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to finish this session without asking about the COVID disclosures in today's Daily Telegraph. Now, we don't know the truth of what happened yet. There are too many messages and too many unknowns. Oh, but families across the country will look at this, and the sight of politicians writing books, portraying themselves as heroes, or selectively leaking messages
Matt Hancock
will be insulting and ghoulish spectacle for them. At the heart of this is every family who made enormous sacrifices for the good of the country, or who tragically lost loved ones. The country deserves better. The COVID inquiry has already cost the taxpayer £85 million and hasn't heard from a single government minister yet. So can the Prime Minister assure the House no more delays, that the inquiry will have whatever support it needs to report by the end of this year?
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, the last couple of years were an incredibly difficult one for everyone involved in the health service, and I pay tribute to all their hard work, and I know the House will join me in that regard. And now, rather than comment on piecemeal bits of information, I'm sure the honourable gentleman will agree with me the right way for these things to be looked at is the COVID inquiry. That's why we've established the COVID inquiry, and he will know, as he has mentioned it 1 or 2 times before, that he was a lawyer in a previous life, that there is a proper process to these things. It is an independent inquiry. It has the resources it needs. It has the powers it needs. And what we should all do in this House is let them get on and do their job.
I mean, I think I could have scripted that answer, to be honest.
Yeah.
it'll finish when it finishes. It's not up to me. But 85 million is a lot.
Yes. I mean, that's a phenomenon. I mean, that might be a real shock to people. 85 million pounds.
To me, I must confess. There's presumably a lot of staff and a lot of buildings and a lot of sitting around and gathering evidence.
And trawling through WhatsApps.
Well, as it will now be. Interesting, though, that Starmer sort of gave Hancock the benefit of the doubt there and said it's not proven yet, and Hancock's been pushing back. I mean, those not following this, essentially there are WhatsApps in which it appears that Hancock declined the advice of the medical experts to test everybody going into care homes and decided only to test people leaving hospital. He claims there was a meeting at which it was decided, including by the scientists, that was impractical, and that has been omitted from the reporting. So it's a bit murky, and Starmer not over-committing to one side or the other on that. But yeah, I think, to be fair to Starmer, I don't think that was, in a sense, an attempt to get Sunak to commit to finishing the inquiry. I think it was more a case of, we really need to talk about this at some point today, and this is a way I can find a procedural way of getting into it without sort of taking sides in the debate itself.
And if we're being really, really cynical, it's always quite handy if you're the Labour leader to, insert yourself in a story of a paper which isn't always terribly friendly towards you.
I dare say there will be a headline in tomorrow's Telegraph saying Starmer calls for fast results.
Yeah.
And job done in that sense.
Sure.
Almost the most explicable and
yes, at least made more sense compared to everything else that's
thing that happened today. Really.
Well, there we are. Alfedas and Pet, indeed. Oh, there we are. Lovely. It seemed the appropriate way to play out that Alfedas and Pet edition of PMQs. We covered a lot of ground from Alfedas and Pet in Polish to Matt Hancock's WhatsApp. Lara Spirit will be here to round up the best of the West in just a moment. She's been watching the backbench contribution so that you don't have to. Somebody's texted in, first and last time I listened to PMQs on Times Radio. I mean, honestly, if you listen to it without us mucking about, it'll be really boring. I guarantee that. You definitely want to be doing that. Right, we'll do that in just a moment. Lara Spirit, in particular, we're interested to see what the reaction from Conservative MPs is today. Are they playing nice? Because Rishi Sunak's had a good week, or do they, him having sorted out one big headache for them on Brexit, does he find, do they come up with a shopping list of other things? And of course, as you'll be delighted, Tim, we'll probably hear from Stephen Flynn, leader of the SNP.
Love it.
We will do.
Yeah, he's good. He comes with a flick knife in his questions. I like him.
He does have his hands in his pockets.
Okay,
I'm not sure about that. Good. Right, we'll do that in just a sec after we get the latest news from Rachel Jewell.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Good afternoon, I'm Eleanor Sherwood. The former Health Secretary Matt Hancock denies allegations he rejected expert advice on COVID testing in care homes during the pandemic. In WhatsApp messages leaked by The Telegraph, the newspaper alleges he was told all residents going into care homes should be tested, but he only introduced them for those coming from hospital. But a spokesman for Mr Hancock says the messages have been doctored to create a false story. Well, in the Commons just now, Sir Keir Starmer's asked Prime Minister Rishi Sunak about the accusations.
Rather than comment on piecemeal bits of information, I'm sure the honourable gentleman would agree with me, the right way for these things to be looked at is the COVID inquiry. That's why we've established the COVID inquiry. And he will know, he has mentioned it one or two times before that he was a lawyer in a previous life, that there is a proper process to these things. It is an independent inquiry. It has the resources it needs.
The DUP's criticised a key part of Rishi Sunak's new Brexit deal as the Prime Minister prepares to sell his agreement to MPs. Sammy Wilson, a senior DUP MP, told Times Radio the Stormont break, the mechanism by which Northern Ireland can reject changes to EU goods rules, is not really a break at all. He says it's a delaying mechanism. The Greek government's announced 3 days of national mourning after 36 people died and dozens were injured in a high-speed train crash. The country's president's cutting short a visit to Moldova, saying she wants to give support to those who need it. Sales of frozen veg are up by 25% as supermarket shelves empty of fresh produce. Tomatoes, cucumbers and peppers are in short supply, with some stores rationing sales due to bad weather and transport problems. In the weather, a cloudy afternoon ahead with light showers, particularly in eastern and central England and southeast Scotland. This will continue into the evening. Kane Reeves has your sport.
After more than 2.5 years, the racism scandal that engulfed English cricket will come to a head over the coming days. This morning, a Cricket Discipline Commission hearing will begin after claims of racism at Yorkshire made by Azim Rafiq. Nick Ellaby is there for Times Radio.
It's over the next 3 days. It starts today. I think today will be quite procedural. I think Azim Rafiq and Adil Rashid will give their evidence tomorrow. Adil Rashid's giving video evidence from Bangladesh. He's actually playing now for England. Their white ball team is playing against Bangladesh at the moment. And then we think Michael Vaughan will appear on Friday. The 6 other former Yorkshire players and coaches have all disengaged with the process. They think it's unfair.
England rugby head coach Steve Borthwick insists fly half Marcus Smith is still in contention to be involved in next week's Six Nations game with France, despite being sent back to his club. Smith's omission coincides with George Ford returning after recovering from injury. Borthwick feels it was important Smith played for Harlequins this weekend.
Inclusion is one to make a decision on which players I think really need to would benefit more from either being in training or game time. And I decided that the decision was to Marcus would benefit from game time at his club this weekend. And having that match sharpness. So that's why I decided that decision.
And the man who holds the record for the most goals scored at a single World Cup has died at the age of 89. Just Fontaine scored 13 times for France at the 1958 tournament in Sweden. After retiring, Fontaine went on to manage PSG and the Moroccan national side. You can discover more about his career on the Times website and app.
This is Times Radio.
The Chancellor today announced markets reacted unanimously. Interest rates will rise.
Just because the economy is uncertain doesn't mean you need to be. At RBC Brew and Dolphin, our advice is always focused on establishing clarity, reaching stability, and steering your investment plans towards a more certain future. To speak to a financial advisor, search RBC Brew and Dolphin. Good decisions follow smart advice. Capital and any income from it is at risk.
So, you've
John Pienaar at Drive, this afternoon from 5 on Times Radio.
Matt Chorley on Times Radio with NetWealth. Try the free digital dashboard that helps you track, plan and invest your wealth. Go to netwealth.com.
Very good afternoon to you. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio. Tim Shipman still here, enjoying the Alfiedas in pet memes.
Yes, I'm being encouraged to speak in other languages, which I shall not do.
Do you speak any other languages?
Un petit peu, as they say.
No, we're waiting for Lara Spirit. Lara Spirit's supposed to be gallivanting in to tell us what the best of the rest from the House of Commons chamber. They've already packed up and finished in the Commons. Do we know what we're doing? We don't know what we're doing. Well, filled 5 seconds. What did you think of PMQs on the YouTubes? Stephen says the series of Alfiedas in where they dismantled the Middlesbrough Transporter Bridge was impressive. It looked so convincing they had to issue a disclaimer to the effect that it's still there.
That was the lesser third series, I think.
Years
okay. After the event.
Well, finally, Lara Spirit is here. Have you had a nice lunch? What have you been doing?
What do you...
You have brought us the best of the rest. You've been watching the others so that we don't have to. What have you brought for us?
So we said before that it was going to be a really fascinating week and we were expecting some interesting contributions on Northern Ireland. There was much more from Conservative MP backbenchers on local schools and even from about the ceramics industry from one MP than there was on kind of substantive engagement on whether or not they'd be supporting Rishi Sunak's flagship Brexit deal. But an interesting question that I think we'll start with from Stephen Flynn, who is, of course, Westminster's SNP leader. What is interesting about this is about the comment mentioned many times in the Chamber yesterday by Rishi Sunak to the effect of seemingly praising the single market and Northern Ireland's unique access to it. But the interesting thing that people should listen out to in this is how Labour are targeted in this question as well. So just have a listen to this.
Stephen Flynn! Mr Speaker, let's be clear. What the Prime Minister said yesterday was that EU single market access will be a good thing for business. Now, of course, that's in contrast to the leader of the Labour Party, who said in December that EU single market access would not boost economic growth. Does it hurt the Prime Minister to know that the Labour Party believe in Brexit more than he does?
Mr Speaker, with regard to Northern Ireland, the important thing to note is to avoid a land border on the island of Ireland between North and South. That is what is crucial to achieve in getting the right framework for the arrangements in Northern Ireland, and the businesses there that trade across that border on a daily basis with complex supply chains need and value that access. That is something that the Windsor framework has sought to achieve and I believe delivers it. It's not about the macro issue of membership of the European Union. It's about getting the right mechanisms in place to support businesses and communities in Northern Ireland. And I would say to the honourable gentleman, he knows better than that. He knows that this is about Northern Ireland, and I hope that he can support what we've agreed.
Interesting. Do you think, Tim Shipman, there was a mistake by Rishi Sunak? Did he just get overexcited when he was in Northern Ireland, talking up the deal and the benefits of Northern Ireland, thinking that people in the rest of the UK might not be listening?
Well, there's always a danger of that. I mean, this has been the case with the deals that they've been doing over there, that it was effectively going to get access to both places. And if you're trying to sell it to the Northern Irish, saying a bunch of businesses might want to come and locate here is a good thing. You can also, frankly, sell it to the rest of the UK on that basis too, that, this can become a hive of a lot of industry that we can benefit from as well. But yes, in terms of the internal machinations of the Conservative Party, eulogising access to the single market is slightly problematic.
And Lara, interesting the point that you make, that Stephen Flynn now facing in two directions. Not just duffing up the Tories, but feeling that he needs to also take a swipe at Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the main features of commentary during this SNP election, right? That a number of pollsters are saying that because of the departure of Nicola Sturgeon, Labour can actually finally set some quite optimistic sights on winning a much higher number of seats north of the border than we might have originally thought they'd done had she not departed. So I think that's why you might end up seeing in Prime Minister's questions quite clear attacks, not just on Rishi Sunak, but also on Keir Starmer too.
There's probably 12 to 20 seats that are now back in play that weren't, and that's quite a big prize. If the SNP is going to keep making the argument that it has a moral right to hold a referendum, if it goes backwards drastically at the next election, that's not going to help it one bit. And Labour is arguably the biggest threat to them now.
Yeah, so they probably need to spend more time worrying about that than the Tories. We've got a Tory MP next, haven't we, Lara?
We've got Alberto Costa next. And I thought this was interesting. So this is about Colin Pitchfork, who is up for parole hearings soon. But it touches on Dominic Raab, Deputy PM, who, of course, was sat next to Rishi Sunak today. Because Alberto called for his constituents' views to be taken into account at this parole hearing. And Rishi Sunak mentioned the root and branch reform that they're making to the review process. And actually, I think something quite interesting about the role of ministerial direction is. So take a listen to this question that I think we'll have now.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As chairman of the All-Party Group for Greece, can I put on record how sad we all are for the tragic train accident that's happened in Greece and for the tragic loss of life. Mr Speaker, double child rapist and killer Colin Pitchfork is once again up for parole next month. Now, I know the Prime Minister doesn't have any decision-making process in terms of the Independent Parole Board, but can he organise an urgent meeting with the Secretary of State for Justice so I can refer my constituents' views about this dangerous man and he can take that into account in his submissions to the Independent Parole Board?
Well, Mr. Speaker, Pitchfork's crimes were heinous, and our thoughts remain with Linda and Dawn's friends and family. My honourable friend for the parole board to determine these decisions, but my honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, will be submitting his views on the Pitchfork case to the parole board before the oral hearing. Is happy to meet with the honourable gentleman again, and we have also recently published a root and branch review of the parole board system, which outlined our plans to introduce greater ministerial oversight, and I look forward to having the contributions and thoughts on that from my honourable friend.
Interesting, Lara. Actually, a good example of a backbench exchange working, because clearly Alberto Costa had told Rishi Sunak what he was going to, at least a broad sense of what he was going to ask about, so that he'd obviously got a pre-prepared answer, and he could give an answer at all, albeit probably not the answer that Alberto Costa wanted.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, what was interesting just watching that on the screen then was Dominic Raab. It looks sweaty quite often, but gave quite a clearly incredulous glance towards Rishi Sunak at the first hearing of that, but then looked quite tense at Rishi Sunak actually committing to there being some sort of meeting or some sort of oversight or contribution that would be possible for Alberto in this case. Yeah, but I think, again, very interesting on the kind of increasingly politicised role that it looks like those hearings will be taking.
I think we've probably got time for one more.
Yeah, I would love to play one more. So we've got Craig Tracy, Tory MP. Like we said before, unlikely that we were going to see an absence of small boats being raised by Tory MPs on the backbenches today. Nothing like what we saw last week, where of course there are multiple questions, but still, here's Craig Tracy kind of trying to get a firm commitment for when we might be seeing that legislation on small boats coming before the House. Of course, that's something that a number of Tory MPs privately are pushing number 10 for reassurances on, something that they repeatedly tell journalists they get a lot of correspondence from angry constituents about.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The tragic death of more than 50 people over the weekend when their small boat broke up off the coast of Italy is a sad reminder of the total disregard for life that the illegal traffickers who facilitate these crossings have in order to make their money. So can the Prime Minister set out what steps he's taken to bring an end to this barbaric trade, and also to reassure my constituents that stopping illegal immigration remains a key priority for this government?
Prime Minister. My honourable friend is right that the tragic incident near Italy at the weekend demonstrates how too well illegal crossings put lives at risk. That's why last year the Home Secretary and I announced 5 new measures to tackle the problem of small boats crossings, including the largest ever boats deal with France and a landmark deal with Albania. But we must do more, and as soon as the legislation is ready, it will be brought to this House to ensure that if you arrive in this country illegally, you will not be able to stay. You will be swiftly detained and removed to your own country or a safe third country alternative. That is the right and responsible way to tackle this problem.
Swallow Above and the Home Secretary sitting there nodding next to Rishi Sunak. This remains a big issue, Tim, and it's one of Rishi Sunak's top 5 priorities: stop the boats.
It is. He has five priorities, 5 pledges. Well, Keir Starmer has 5 missions. Very important distinction.
But the trouble is, but it's Rishi Sunak's are more specific, and therefore they are harder to meet.
And actually, Rishi Sunak initially said he would pass legislation to try to stop the boats. Now he's pledging to stop the boats because it's a lot shorter to stick on a strap line, and doing that by the end of the year is going to be more problematic. And MPs want to see this legislation, and Sunak may just have bought himself a little bit of time with this Northern Ireland deal, though, because everyone was saying, "Where's the deal? You've done the deal. Why are you poring over all the detail? Why are you taking an age over it?" And most people seem persuaded that that was worthwhile now, and he can maybe turn around to some of his MPs and say, "Look, I got this right. I'm hoping that I'm going to get the small boats legislation right as well. Give me time and we'll get it right."
Some of them might think, well, actually, maybe he could build a constructive relationship with France, which would be a starting point.
Well, and that was part of the argument that people were beginning to get into last week when some people, including Boris Johnson, were still pushing this Northern Ireland Protocol bill. People in Downing Street were saying, well, look, that will blow up any chance we've got of getting any further progress with the French. And the Home Secretary, is building a relationship there, and we need to crack on with that instead. So, yeah, it's going to remain a big issue, but we wait and see precisely what they've come up with. We know that, again, a bit like the Brexit deal, we know the broad thrust of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
But it's getting the the devil's always in the detail, and it's getting
That's almost worth a ring of the bell.
illegal working properly written down.
So Tory MP yesterday said they wanted to take a detailed look at the detail, which I thought was particularly good.
Well, make a change, wouldn't it?
Well, that's all we've got time for. Thank you, Lara, for popping in eventually.
I was trying to see if Rosie Duffield was going to say anything interesting, but it was just about NOS canisters, so I'm afraid that didn't get a hearing today. And it wasn't worth it, so I'm really sorry.
Well, you made it here in the end, which was lovely. And I don't think anybody noticed the massive gap of long silence. It was fine.
No, I thought you handled that very well without drawing attention to it.
Really filled. So, yeah, I think it was fine. Good. Well, do vinidznia to you both, as we say, pet. That brings us to the end of the Alfina's in Pet edition of PMQs Unpacked. Thanks for all your messages saying how much you didn't enjoy it. They're always lovely to read. Right, up next, we're going to find out why Theresa May has won an award for making a speech. The whole world's gone mad. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio. Oh, by the way, Lara will be in your inbox later, 2:30, rounding up PMQs Unpacked. And I'll be on with Jane and Fee just after 4 o'clock, repeating all of this if you haven't had enough. Alfreda's in Pet. Good. This is Matt Chorley on Times Radio with NetWealth. For a clear review of your financial world, go to netwealth.com.
The Recharge, every Friday afternoon from 1 on Times Radio with BMW and the Recharge in Nature project. Join Ruth Davidson as she explores the challenges facing our natural environment whilst uncovering the ways in which we can help to recharge both nature and ourselves within the UK's